capacities and expertise. Over the years, his role expanded to include marketing and strategy, enabling him to play a key role in establishing and growing Marcus Millichap's national brand. Wow, that's always a problem with me. Well, today he joins us to discuss supply and demand, sales, pricing, interest rates, rent control, and a slew of other issues important to the industry. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Hessam Nadji.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Sheila. First and foremost, I want to thank Bill Scheer for having us back. This year I've had the distinct pleasure of presenting to you many times in the past, and to be asked back hopefully means that you're not bored with what we have to present. And there's a little bit of redundancy because people want to see an update to some of our previous discussions. But I'm here to give you a little bit of a fresh perspective, at least in the way we see the world transpiring for apartments and the economy in general. Let me first say that on behalf of every Marcus Millichap agent, every IPA agent focuses on our institutional clients, we're very proud to take part in this. And our job is to really share perspective, share information. We are very much driven by market research, and it's an important part of our connection with development. So with that, if you were here last year and was part of this market discussion, I wanted to take a step back and basically do a little bit of a retrospective. And I'm going to do that again. So the idea was that if you'd been abducted by, let's say, aliens 10 years ago, and just returned to Earth today, and you were trying to catch up on what's going on, what would you find? It's an important way of looking at where we really stand, given all the angst and given all the fear factor that seems to be all over the market today. So here's what you will find. As of right now, in the last 10 years, since 2007, which was not a bad year, by the way, we've added more than 25 million people to the population of the United States. We've added almost 11 million households. We've added 11 million jobs. Net jobs, total jobs today are 11 million more than they were 10 years ago. Unemployment is below 3%. It's 130 basis points below where it was at that time. We have almost 7 million job openings. That is a record number of job openings. Employers can find workers, qualified workers, for about a third of the jobs that we have openings for. Think about that. Think about the difference in the environment from an employment perspective. Our GDP has grown by over 5.5, almost $5.7 trillion in the last 10 years. And as I shared with you last year, this number keeps growing. It is the equivalent of Japan's total economy. So in 10 years, we've grown by Japan's total economic output. If you were to go to any street across the United States and ask anybody, do you feel that? They would tell you that they don't. Do you feel these jobs? They would tell you that they don't. And that has a lot to do with the fact that we had a terribly, terribly bad recession, really more of a crisis than a recession. And psychologically, the market in some ways never recovered from that. But if you keep looking at these stats, let's keep going. Inflation is 120 basis points below it was, as measured by personal consumption expenditures, which is the most important measurement that the Fed looks at. So we've had this tremendous growth in a low inflation environment, almost to perfection. We have interest rates that are 100 basis points below they were 10 years ago. Who thought that a 3.1 on the 10-year Treasury would feel like really high interest rates? But because of the fact that it's moved up a lot in the last 6 to 9 months, we're all reacting as though we have an interest rate problem. Well, we do, depending on how you underwrote some of those recap deals you bought a year ago, or are looking at buying now. But from a macro perspective, big picture perspective, we are still in a low interest rate, low inflation environment. Here's something that you cannot find anywhere else in the world. We have 10,000 people a day, this day, 10,000 people will turn to 65. The aging of the population that's happening around the world. Japan has it, Western Europe has it, Russia certainly has it. Well, what they don't have, that the United States has, people the day of turning 21 at the same time. That amazing dual demographic wave is a massive opportunity for everybody involved in commercial real estate and apartments. We'll talk about that in a moment. So the picture doesn't look all that bad. If you were to do the same exercise for apartments, you'd find very low vacancy rates, 210 basis points lower than where we were. The average rent is 37% above where it was in 2007. 37%. The average cap rate is 80 basis points lower. That's not a surprise. And there are almost 40% more trading volume happening in terms of sales across the country. This industry has really flourished, has come to its own. And the trading volume is 66% above where it was. So capital has found apartments. Capital has found the benefits of the yield versus safety of this sector. And I don't think capital is about to exit. The compelling reasons why apartments are what they are. But the world is changing. The world is definitely changing. A year ago, when I was here before you, we had all kinds of angsts. Every year it seems like the angsts shift. This was one of them. There was a big topic in terms of the threat of war with North Korea. Seems like we've become friends, at least in appearance. So, we can't overreact to everything we see in the media and hear in the media. And that is probably the most important point of today. Now, there's one thing you're hearing a lot about in the media that I do want you to overreact to, and that's Prop 10. We'll talk about that here in a minute. So let's keep going. Let's keep looking at the underlying data. Today, the American consumer spends 17% more than we did in 2007, at the peak of 2007. This is inflation adjusted. Inflation adjusted. So when we refine our houses practically once a month, back in 06, 07, and the world was driven by an unsustainable, basically, debt glut, where so much money was being thrown around with very little underwriting. That level of spending on the retail side was 17% lower than today's jobs-driven, fundamentals-driven, lack of bubble-driven expenditure. So the power of the U.S. consumer cannot be underestimated. We're doing so much better than people believe. As I said, the world is changing. Nothing is changing more than the world of retail. Why is that important for us in apartments? Because the way we develop apartments is already changing. And it's going to change some more. Look at this, what I call the X factor. I love this slide. It's the X factor slide I use in every retail presentation. And, I wanted to figure out a way to cheer you up as apartment experts, so I thought we'd spend a little time on retail. This is the share of department stores as percent of total sales versus e-commerce. Look at the crash of department store sales as e-commerce takes off. What this means that right now, this is what your front porch looks like. Every front porch in America is saturated with crap we don't need. And Amazon just patented literally a floating distribution center where drones will bring you your deodorant within 2 hours or less. I don't know what the hurry is for all this crap that we don't need. But nevertheless, it seems to be driving the American society, or actually the global society. The point being, this isn't going to go away. It is profoundly changing the way we do everything. And nothing is going through a wave of reinvention faster and more dramatically than retail real estate. So from the standpoint of observing that and thinking about how that applies to apartments and what can be learned and applied on the apartment side, there is a hell of a lot of lessons learned and benefits to think about. Every bit of good news I just gave you in terms of where we are, who we are, and how we're doing business and how we're living, just got a little tailwind, just got a little extra fuel in the form of tax reform. Tax reform lowered the corporate tax rate and certain tax rates of different income brackets significantly. And the most important thing about it is that companies are actually spending the extra money on expansion, planned equipment, hiring. And that is giving this cycle an extra boost. We haven't seen the benefits of it yet, because it's fairly new. I mean, tax benefits really take a cycle or two to really show up. For commercial real estate, you would think that a real estate guy wrote it, or something. Because all the benefits that were already baked in for commercial real estate were preserved, and a bunch of additional provisions were added to the law. This has not shown up in the marketplace yet. Most of our clients, we had over 10,000 people on our first webcast talking about the tax reform early in the year. We've had an update. And the vast majority of people still don't really understand the application of the specifics of the benefits of some of the provisions. Neither do a lot of tax guys, because answers are still coming. So think about another cycle or two of tax returns and this benefit in investing in commercial real estate becoming more profound and present in the marketplace. In fact, if you take a look at the client surveys that we've done, the vast majority of the marketplace, almost 60%, see the new tax law as an added value for commercial real estate in terms of investment capital coming in and property values. And next to industrial, apartments are the second biggest beneficiary in terms of more demand, more capital demand expected to come in because of the nature of the tax law. With retail, everyone is just really scared about retail. So anything about retail tends to rank the least these days. If we take a look at where we are in the marketplace today, there is still a spread. The marketplace is still using a pretty good level of discipline in the way that we're pricing primary markets and preferred markets, the coastal markets, preferred 7, the sexy 9, and so on, versus the secondary markets and tertiary markets. Unlike what we saw in 2006, 2007, where that spread had really squeezed out of the market, there's still a spread here. But the opportunity in this market is still very visible in secondary and tertiary markets. Even institutional clients we work with are far more open to quality assets in secondary and tertiary markets than they were even a year or two ago, because of the yield profile and because of the fact that the asset quality now really overrides some of the fears about smaller markets, because the economic growth has been pretty broad-based. Virtually every metro around the country is adding jobs. But when you have an economic picture like this today, where you've got this shortage of qualified workers, this basically shows you the job openings increasing, the unemployment rate coming down, this creates a boiling point of pressure on wages, which is the most important part of inflation. Remember I said we were in a low inflation environment, high growth environment. I also mentioned on the graph that the tax reform is stimulative and therefore inflationary. We do have an inflation concern. I've shared this with you before. A couple years ago I showed this as a model of how we finally figured out what drives interest rates, which turned out to be the height of the Federal Reserve chair people. This is an old analysis, but true. Yellen was 5 foot tall. I don't think you're surprised at all by interest rates when Paul Volcker on the left there was 6'7". And it's therefore no surprise that interest rates are rising and Jim Powell is 5'10". Look, this is sophisticated research. It took months and months of modeling with PhDs in Poland to help us figure this out. And what I learned early in my career is, hey, it fits, use it. So interest rates are going up. Let's hope that LeBron doesn't go for this office, because we would all be in trouble if that would happen. I don't think he's interested in the job. But the long and short of it is, interest rates need to go up. They have been going up, and that's a normal part of transitioning from an accommodative stance from the Fed to a more normal stance from the Fed. They've done what they needed to do. Our position is that they might take a little bit of a breather to see what the effect of their actions have been already, because it takes 6 to 9 months to actually see the effects of the higher interest rates in the way that the economy slows. And we would not want to see them go too far too fast and really tamper with the economic growth. So this chart is not my heart rate when I saw the interest rate going up. It is actually an indication of the yield curve versus recessions. The gray areas are recessions.
The yield curve being the spread between short-term interest rates and long-term interest rates, having been a very effective foreteller of recessions. It either inverted, went below the line right before a recession or very early in a recession, and look at the trend on the right side of this graph, it's going down. But if the Fed does pause a little bit, and the long-term has caught up a little bit, are we going to invert and therefore be in a recession anytime in the next, let's say, a few months? If you were to ask people, you would think, by noon tomorrow, we should be in a recession. And given all the different elements of what's happening with job growth, with still pretty muted but rising inflation, we're not expecting a recession around the corner. But what the Fed does and how the Fed handles this transition is a risk. It is clearly one of the risks. If they go too far too fast, you could really take the wind out of the economy. I don't anticipate that in the foreseeable future, in the next 12 to 18 months.